Hey guys, LevelCap here. Today is Monday, which means it's time for an episode of Loadout, the series where you guys, the viewers, get to pick a gun and customization for me to use. The way you do this is you leave a comment down below letting me know what kind of weapon and accessories you'd like me to run with, and I will pick one of the top rated comments for the next episode. Today's top comment comes from Janik Benius, who says, Battlefield 4 trailer Loadout, M16A3 with the 3.4 American scope, heavy barrel, no foregrip or bipod, MP412 Rex, grenade launcher, squad sprint. Now, I did throw the bipod on here just because if we use the grenade launcher without the bipod, then it will be attached to the M16, and in the trailer it wasn't actually attached. Now, I was running squad sprint for a while, but then, as squad perks start to overlap, I switched mine up. I ended up running ammo and kind of neglecting some of the squad stuff. I don't think it really matters too much. The idea is to sort of use the same gun and scope from the trailer. The 3.4 times, and I made the mistake of calling it the American scope. It's actually a Canadian scope. But when I say American, I just mean the one that is by default available to the American side. But this scope I see so rarely used, at least on assault rifles. The most common time I see this scope being used in-game is with machine gunners. I think the distance marks on the scopes are actually pretty helpful for hitting those targets at long range when you're set up with a bipod. But when you're running around with an assault rifle, look how big this freaking scope is. I mean, not only does it take up most of the screen, but when you're not even ADSing, it's this huge thing just sitting there right in the middle of your screen. It actually does take up quite a lot of your viewable screen area. It'll be interesting to see how this translates to Battlefield 4. As I mentioned in my sort of Battlefield 4 trailer analysis, the angle of the guns in the game are different from Battlefield 3, so they actually take up a little bit less of the screen. They're kind of hunched back a little bit. It feels like they're sort of held in tighter, closer to the shoulder. You see less of the stock, and the scope doesn't get in the way so much. So larger scopes feel like they'll be more economical to run around with, so you might actually find people using some of these higher magnification scopes more frequently. I have a feeling though that the actual game style is going to really overtake, and the fact that a fast shooter doesn't necessarily require such a high magnification scope might play a bigger factor. Of course, we did see those offset sights on the side, so if you do have a 3.4 times scope on there, you can always use the iron sights that are mounted on the side. And when I say always, I don't know if that's always a situation. I'm sure it'll be available for some guns, but who knows, maybe some of the AK weapons won't have offset sights. I'm not really sure how that's going to play out, but it'll be interesting just to see if players start using the higher magnification scopes more, or if they're just comfortable using their red dot sights. Who knows, maybe you can have an offset red dot sight to the side of your weapon. That way you can have the best of both worlds. Say an ACOG on top, a red dot sight on the side, and you're good to go. Now the M145, or the 3.4 times scope, is an interesting scope. It does take up a lot of your screen when you zoom in with it, which is something that I don't like. The distance markers on it are quite useful for long-range shooting. The problem I have with the distance markers is that the one hash mark that is above the crosshair in the center is a slightly thicker line, so by default on reflex I tend to use that line to aim at, and that one is just a little bit too high, and I end up aiming low on a lot of my shots, and this is just something that you have to get used to with this scope. It's quite aggravating, I have to say. And I was looking at pictures of the actual scope, and it doesn't seem like the hash mark above the crosshair in the center is actually thicker on the real world scope. Also, if you pay attention to the Battlefield 4 trailer, you'll notice that the crosshair in the center of the scope has some red highlights on it, which makes it much easier to tell where the center spot on the scope is. I like the Battlefield 4 version of this M145 scope much better. Now I have to say it was nice to get back to the M16A3. I used to play with this gun all the time back in the day. But you guys sort of made your opinions clear, and people wanted a good variety of gameplay showing lots of different guns, not just the M16A3, which is fine. I'm actually enjoying getting good with all the other guns in the game, but coming back to the M16A3 was just sort of a delight. It's like, oh yeah, I remember why I like this gun more than any other gun in the game. Just the reload speed, the power, the rate of fire. There's not a lot to not like about the M16A3. In case you forgot just how awesome the M16A3 16A3 is it has a nice 800 round per minute rate of fire, making it one of the faster firing assault rifles. It can't quite compete with the F2000 AEK or FAMAS, the FAMAS coming in at 1000 rounds per minute, AEK 900 rounds per minute, but its rate of fire is still fast enough to down anybody, incredibly fast, and still allow you to maintain that recoil at medium distances with pretty darn good accuracy. It also has that 1.8 second short reload time, which means that if you haven't fired off every bullet in your magazine, reloads are something that you barely even have to think about. They're so freaking fast. You compare it to the FAMAS, which has a short reload of 3.05 seconds. That is a world of difference. That extra second oftentimes will get you killed. Somebody rushes your position while you're doing the reload and you will be caught mid-reload and an easy kill. Timing your reload with other weapons is something that really does factor into gameplay a lot more. With a slow reloading weapon, you really have to consider what environments you're going to run into, if you're going to have enough time to get that reload off, or if you're going to have to switch to your sidearm. With the M16A3, it's much less critical thinking in that department. You just kind of run in, fire off your rounds, reload. If somebody actually gets you mid-reload with the M16A3, it's usually just very unlucky for you and very happenstance. Most of the time you can complete your reload before the next enemy comes around the corner. Now, at one point during Battlefield 3's patching history and trying to balance the game, DICE decided to try and nerf the M16A3 a little bit. This was actually a pretty interesting change because it really did make a lot of other weapons viable compared to the M16A3. I know a lot of people like the AEK better than the M16. I guess it really depends on what map you're in. I think in close quarters the AEK is probably going to beat out the M16 most of the time. But they added basically an extra bit to the side-to-side recoil of the M16A3, making it a little bit more difficult to control at range. Not too much, but just like a hint more difficult to control at range. And this sort of made people have to think, well, hang on a second, the M16A3 isn't necessarily the best at all tasks. It's a little bit worse at long range, so now people are thinking, okay, well, the M416 seems a bit better choice at longer ranges, or some of the slower firing assault rifles are much more accurate at range, and then you've got the AEK for close quarters, so the M16 sort of been more funneled into this medium range weapon, which still isn't a bad thing, since most engagements in this game, if you can set it up to your liking, will be at medium ranges. It seems to be the most common distance that I engage my opponents at, and of course in close quarters it's not like 800 rounds per minute on a full automatic platform. It's going to be something bad to have. In fact, it's going to be incredibly good. Ultimately, I think I'm really most curious to see what's going to happen with this gun in Battlefield 4. Again, referencing my trailer analysis video, I sort of compared the ADS times and the reload times with the M16 in BF4 compared to BF3, and they were identical. It was pretty much copy-paste animations and weapon models, which I don't have a problem with, but I'm very curious to see if they're just going to copy and paste the gun stats over as well, if they're really happy with the weapon balance, or if they're going to try and shake things up a bit more. Ultimately, for this loadout, I can't recommend the 3.4 times scope. Sure, it looks kind of cool, but it just takes up way too much of the screen, and the zoom in factor I think is a little bit overkill for the accuracy that this weapon provides. It's a fun gun, but you'd be much better off with a reflex sight or a hollow sight. So thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to leave your comments down below letting me know what kind of gun and accessories you'd like me to run with for the next episode, and I'll see you next time. This is LevelCap, signing off.